And we're live. Hi, Nikki.
Hi, Kathleen. How are you?
I'm so good, thank you. I know that this conversation is long overdue, so I'm really, really happy that we could make it work.
Absolutely. I always say that conversations happen at exactly the right time that they need to. And at this stage in 2022, it feels like the right time.
Exactly. And I think if I'm correct, the previous conversation would have happened before the launch of your latest book. So it probably is perfect timing.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more because it's always a richer conversation. There's more to talk about and more support to give.
Exactly. The older we get, the more we're able to share, the more we've learned. So I'm very, very excited to have you here. We're going to give it a couple moments just to see who pops on. Hi, Nola. Lovely to have you here. I'm just going to have a quick check on the Facebook page. Just make sure that we are good there. Those of you who are joining us live, please say hi. Let us know how you're doing. How's your day been? How's your week been? I cannot believe we're at the end of September. It actually blows my mind. All right. Cool. Well, I think we can get started. So welcome to everyone who's here with us. I have the amazing Nikki here today and very, very excited. Morning, Nicole. Welcome, everyone. Morning, Renata. Or is it morning? It's afternoon. Afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I think let's just start, Nikki, with a little bit of an introduction to who you are. I always love hearing from people where they're from, a little bit of your childhood, your upbringing. It's always just a good place to start finding out who someone is.
Absolutely. Well, I grew up in Durban back when Umhlanga used to be a sugarcane field. So that should give something of my age away from that perspective. And I've always been one of those people who just loved getting my hands into the clay of life, figuring things out, seeing what's going on. And really that led me to a career where, I wanted to figure out how businesses worked. And so I went down the chartered accountancy path, but I never wanted to be a chartered accountant. And someone said to me, that feels like a waste. And I said, no, it's just, figuring out what makes a business tick. And it was the best background because I was at a smaller audit firm to actually understand businesses. So I was voted least likely to remain in auditing, which came through very quickly after articles. And I now introduce myself as a reformed accountant who fixes and builds businesses by day. But really, it was that lived experience that led me to the work I do today. I'm still in corporate, working on big projects and big things that I love to get done because I love to solve problems and have impact. But I'm also being called to really support people around a different way.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible. It's so interesting how life takes us through all these different avenues. I know for me it was production. So I was in the production and advertising and film industry for a long time, and was also like, I need to get out of this environment permanently. But the lessons and the skills that I learned there I've applied them to so many other aspects of my life. So it's just always that little bit of a reminder of you are where you need to be right now, and that it will pay forward. And what I really love about your work, and I think it's something that a lot of women are doing at the moment, is women's work. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. Kind of what was the first thing that initiated you working with women?
Well, it was actually a path that opened up for me during COVID. I think during lockdown and the pandemic, when you have that headspace, it's amazing what comes through. I'd been on a journey to heal in 2018, 2019, dealing with massive stress within my body, my nervous system. And that was really something that I struggled with significantly. I'd been chasing a big corporate title of a COO, but I was really grinding my body into the ground. And so my first thing was really, how do I heal? And I'll talk to my big wake up call shortly, because I definitely was at a crossroads around heal, or, as a medical professional said to me, I was on the brink of hospitalization, or, an autoimmune disease. And that was a bit of a moment for me, because you can't get your health back once you've lost it. It's not something we can go to the shops and take it off the shelf and get it back. And I've been very fortunate. Possibly it's that A-type personality coming through, where, I'd done everything when I was on my journey to heal, and I was able to heal in under 6 months, a journey that normally takes people 2 to 3 years. And really my diagnosis was massive digestive issues, huge tension locked into almost every aspect of my body. But really what had happened then is I used to pop ribs out on a regular basis. And most people think that's alarming, but I'd normalized it because of the tension in my back. And then I was told that I had a partial dislocation of my shoulder, but the problem was I hadn't felt it. Because my nervous system was so strung out, what I call a tightly clenched fist, as opposed to a gently unfurling hand that feels easeful, that allows me to move with life as I should, rather than being what was then later diagnosed as in a state of freeze in my nervous system. Basically, it's that hyper state of fight or flight where you're permanently there. And they've actually only ever seen, normally before this kind of stress that we deal with day to day, it was only previously seen in wartime victims, people who were waiting for bombs to drop. And yet here we were spending our days and 70% of our time in stress. It puts your nervous system into a really stressed out state, whether we realize it or not. You know how everyone reacts when you're sitting in traffic, when you get that email from that one person who triggers you. And unfortunately, when we live in a state of chronic stress, we put everything else on hold other than immediate survival. And that was a very long way of me telling you how I got to do women's work, but I want to come to that now. Literally, I was called to share my story, my lived experience. And that led to writing not one book, but 2 books over the last 2 years. And it's been the most incredible journey, but it's really in service to help other people know that they're not alone, that there is a path that doesn't feel like it's huge and massive that we have to do, but it's small and intentional and conscious every day. And I really wanted to share that because so many of the books I read, again, it's that nerdiness that came with being a chartered accountant and all of those good things, although not all chartered accountants are nerds, before I get myself into trouble there. But, really, I'd read over 80 books and papers to write my first book because I wanted to understand the science, but I wanted to shortcut it for other people. But also I didn't want it to be that dense, theoretical, academic kind of book, which so many of the books on stress are not from people who've been in those situations. The number of women who've said to me, literally and figuratively, Nix, I think I was sitting in that toilet cubicle next to you when you can't even collect your thoughts, you don't know what you need to do next. It became my escape pod at work, just trying to collect my thoughts and get away from everything. And I want to help.
Yeah, I mean, I can resonate with so much of that. And I think that often when we think of stress state, when we think of sympathetic nervous system, everyone immediately goes, oh, fight or flight. But I think that freeze is probably where most of us are. I actually had a conversation with my mother about it this morning. And I said, I've unlocked a lot of stress that I've been holding, and reflecting on how you'll have that one email that you need to send, and 3 weeks later you just haven't been able to send that email, and you're just completely frozen and unable to do it. And how that is such it becomes so manifested in the body, as you were saying now, that we become desensitized to it because you just override the signals that your body is sending.
Yeah.
And I actually I've got Nikki's book here. And it's blurring a little bit. The 7 Steps to Finding Flow, which is your first book. And from, I actually need to find it now. You told a story about a flight that you were on. I don't know if you want to give a quick, short little summary of that story just before I read this piece.
Yeah. So if anyone's ever heard of people flying in to do the trek to Everest Base Camp, you have to fly into a place called Lukla in Nepal. And it has, I think it's the world's most dangerous airport. I don't know if that still holds. But basically, it's got a cliff face on one side and a mountain drop off on the other. And they actually can't land or take off. It's misty. But the worst part is the actually leaving. You know, I often thought that arriving would be the worst because you've got to hit this tiny little short runway and slam on brakes so you don't slam into the cliff wall. But it was really when we took off and the plane, they accelerate the plane with the brakes on. And so the whole plane starts to shake. And my dear friend, an Australian friend, was very nervous. There were tears streaming down her face, but it literally, you can just feel everything starting to shake. And then they release the brakes. And like Indiana Jones, you drop off the edge of the runway and hope that, you know, the plane carries on flying. It invariably does, but it really gave me that analogy. And I don't know if you want to read your excerpt first before I give away anything that
I think so. That's perfect. So this really stood out to me in the book. And it's a piece just after the story was told. Accelerating with the brakes on and then hoping I could fly is possibly symbolic of how I was living in my body every single day. I was driving my body and soul deeper and deeper into the ground, worn out through the sheer relentlessness of it all. What I hadn't factored in is that my nervous system was sending signals to my cells, constantly providing intelligence and information on how I was perceiving my environment. My cells responded and reacted to the signals I was sending that I didn't feel safe. My biology adjusted to match my context. My consciousness had been an interpretation of my environment, but that was filtered through what my body was perceiving. And that's just, those words are really, really magic. And I'd love for you to just give us a little reflection on what that means and the connection between stress and how it manifests in the physical body.
Absolutely. Because so often we think that we can overthink how our body's interpreting stress. We can make it happen and override that. But everything comes back to safety within our body. Our thoughts, our environment, they all send micro signals to our body, which then triggers our autonomic nervous system to say, right, is there safety here? Can I go into that rest and digest? And I'm going to keep it simple. I'm not going to get into the science in a short chat. Or do I need to go into fight or flight to really then say, right, get to safety? But often that stress signal is happening, you know, when we haven't even, like a stressor doesn't even have to happen. It's just the mere anticipation of a stressor coming. So again, you think that thought, your body's going, I'm not safe. And that then immediately floods your cells with stress hormones, almost like you're running away from a lion. Because that's really, our bodies haven't intellectualized that we're dealing with an email or that we're dealing with a tough conversation or that we're frustrated in traffic. And it then sends it to all of those cells, our arms and our legs, to say, get away from danger. So that's why if we spend our time in chronic stress, we put things on hold like reproduction, hair growth, digestion, which was where I really got hit. But it's all of those micro signals that are constantly coming in that we don't pay attention to because we think that we can overthink it. And that's the problem when we stay always on, as I call it. I think that's the second chapter in that book, where we really speak about not allowing that natural flow of our day of, okay, we move into a stressor and we move out of it, because we have to allow that natural flow in life to be able to then come back more creative, more balanced, more present in the current moment, in tune with our breath. Instead, we treat our energy levels and our lives like this straight line that just goes up, redlining through our lives. And that's, our bodies are consciously taking that in all that time. And when we're spending all of our time in a stressed out state, in fight or flight or a state of freeze, you can only wonder what that feels like in your body. It's whispering to you all the time, take a breath, take a break, have a nap, walk outside, get that cup of tea. But we think we know better in our emotions and our intellect. And that's why I say to people, and I talk a bit about this more in my second book, it's really around what I call the wobbly stool. Because if we sit in our emotions and our intellect the whole time, our IQ and our EQ, we don't tune into our bodies. our SQ, that soul quotient. It's no wonder that everything's a little bit wobbly, because we're just letting all of that override it, and we don't treat our bodies like part of our universal team, whereas our bodies are part of the team. We can't treat them as a robot separate to us, thinking it can just keep coping and keep up with us. I mean, I got very upset with my body because it wasn't keeping up with my ambitions and the titles I was chasing. I thought I should be able to just cope.
I see we've got a comment in here from Liesel saying, powerful. I always thought I was great in multitasking, having a family and being a remedial full-time teacher. But during COVID being still, I realized I was not thriving, but just surviving, not ever being in the moment. I changed my life since.
Yeah. And that's so incredibly powerful, because I think there is such a big narrative out there around what success looks like. And especially for women, so many women have been told they should want to have it all because they can. The problem is we put ourselves at the back of that energy queue. And I've actually got an entire chapter on this in my second book called Self First is No Longer Selfish. We have to, and Tuli Madonsela spoke about this so powerfully when I saw her talk, because someone said, you've got all of these balls in the air. How do you not drop one? And she said, I'm intentional. I put balls down. No one can multitask effectively. We just give our bodies intellectual and, physical chemical whiplash because it's going, what was I doing? And we don't deliver our best energy for ourselves or others. And we have to put ourselves on our own to-do list and prioritize ourselves and our energy levels, because otherwise we will end up tired, finished, dreaming of that oasis at the end of the year as a holiday, but it's actually too far off in the distance. And so the best advice I can give to people is look at all of those balls you've figuratively got up in the air. Which ones are glass and which ones are plastic and will bounce? Because your family will not bounce if you ignore them. Your health will not bounce, but you can get to a work task tomorrow. It'll bounce.
Sure. I actually got a physical reaction to everything you said now. Full goosebumps. It's actually one of my favorite things to say to people. If you think your body and your mind and your emotions are not connected, then, why do we get goose flesh in moments? Why do we cry when we're sad? Why does the stomach turn when you're nervous? It is also connected. And if our body is reacting to these bigger emotions, we can also imagine how it's responding to the most subtlest of signs that we are sending consciously or subconsciously. I also love that you bring in SQ, which I have not really spent a lot of time chatting about. So we're going to have to have that conversation, but we have to move on to something else now. Yes. It's from your chapter 4. Yeah. And you say here, once we have an awareness of our energy and the choices we make daily, we can start to make choices to incorporate small habits that top up our energy budget every day. And that is just, I love that you have an energy budget for every day. I think that's going to look different for every individual. And so I would love to ask you, what are 3 things that top up your energy budgets?
Absolutely. Well, the best way, just before I get into that, I'm going to ask people to think about their energy budget like your phone battery. You've got limited charge every day. You want to use it optimally, but we're not going to get a warning indicator when it's depleted, and it often depletes very quickly towards the end. So my ways that I top up my energy budget is I'm very intentional about certain routines in my life. My morning routine and my sleep routine are gold, including the full stop at the end of my day, because I'm not a heart surgeon. Unfortunately, if someone is a heart surgeon on here, that's a different conversation altogether. But no one will die if I shut my laptop at the end of the day, if I turn off notifications and put on those nighttime settings. But I especially because I'm a morning person, that's where I win my day. But I've also learned not to overly structure that. I flow with what I feel like. I love practicing gratitude, whether it be journaling, getting outside into nature, and just activating all of my senses, because it's amazing how that just tunes you in. And then movement and music. And I use those terms generally because it's different for everyone. Some people love yoga. Some people love Pilates. Some people love, a 10K run. get your body moving, get into your body and activate those five senses. Smell your tea or your coffee and really just take it all in. So for me, it's gratitude, my routine. And the other one that's recently it's come in the last 3 years, and I talk about this a lot in the book. It's grounding. I get out into nature and I take my shoes off, and I literally, if there's any worries sitting in my body, I send them down into the earth. And I know for some people that might be a little woo-woo, but I've decided to reframe that as woohoo, because we need to get back in touch with ourselves and our bodies. And the whole principle around grounding is that we can't expect to be in touch with ourselves in nature if we insulate ourselves from it.
I mean, yeah, I've moved out to Vermont, Hermanus, and for me, it's been the ocean. Getting out in the water and just, it is just being out in nature, being out in the elements. It has such a positive effect on us. I mean, there's so many studies that have been done. Things like, also like the woo-woo of like hugging trees. People always say like hippies are like the tree huggers, but there's actually so much magic in being out and physically connecting to nature. I want to lead on to, because you've touched on it slightly, but I know that one of your specialities is journaling. I am a big advocate for it, and everyone who's here knows that I'm always encouraging, whether it's 5 minutes, whether you're writing a story, whether it needs to be fictional or non-fictional. It's something that I do if I'm a bit restless in bed and I've got thoughts running around. I jot them down into my journal, and it just allows me to go okay, I've put it somewhere safe and I can let it go now. So I actually found some of my journals the other day from when I was about, I think, 9 years old, even younger. I've still got all of those, and it's so interesting to have those as like reflection tools as well. It's something that you can keep, and I've got your gratitude journal as well, which is just so beautifully put together. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about how you put that together. Where did the inspiration come from?
So just before I get into that, I think it's so important, and that's why in both of my books, at the end of every chapter, they're journal prompts, because you can read it. There's a summary, what I call a fast forward to flow in the first book, and then there's the journal prompts, because you can read something and you can gloss over it, but until we actually get intentional and start to own our own reflections, and writing it down is one of the best ways to do that. We really don't let that land within our bodies around, this is what's going on. And that's why I say to people often, when you're doing the journal prompts, put your hand on your heart and just be kind to yourself. Don't judge yourself. Just remind yourself that your best is good enough. It's another good way to get back into your body, calm your nervous system, along with some deep breaths. But journaling's been such a big practice for me. Similar to what you were talking about, I love just a blank journal, and I'll often just let it hold those thoughts. Takes them out of that busy head and it puts them down, and it says that's okay. And I often just keep writing and then read it back. And I'm often very surprised at what I've written, because it's often that unconscious coming through into the conscious. And a great tip I love to give people if they don't have a journal handy is send yourself a WhatsApp voice note. If you've got your own personal WhatsApp group with yourself, and listen back to it. Everyone's different. It's such a powerful tool. But I also realized that so many people struggle with a blank page. Like, they don't know where to start. They don't know what to write. So my Inspired Change journal business that I started in 2018 really works with a balance of structure and space. Whether you're going after productivity and goals with small steps daily, whether you're looking at to build a focus around gratitude specifically, or wanting to build an intentional life around being more rather than just doing more, I've built some great journals around that really guide people through that process. And a Finding Flow journal is actually coming out next year as the perfect companion to the first book, which I'm super excited about.
I couldn't agree more. I think, I see we've got a comment here saying my journals have been my lifesaver since a young age, almost like an imaginary friend. That is awesome, Niesel. And then Esme says, I've been researching energy management and read that we should put a cap on energy we are willing to spend on certain tasks, regardless if you're done with the tasks. So, e.g., 20 minutes of hard focus on client complaints. That's great, Ace. That's really, really great. I think, when it comes to something like journaling, and I love that you said, put your hand on your heart and don't judge yourself, because I think that's probably the main factor that often stops people from writing is you're like, what if this sounds stupid? I don't know what to write. Suddenly there's not one thought in my head. And my advice really is just start writing. Some days I'll start writing on my page and I'll literally start by writing, I actually don't know what to write today. I actually don't know what's going on in my head. There's nothing I want to put on this piece of paper. And the more, as you get going with the writing, you'll just notice the floodgates start to open and whatever needs to come through will come through. But you need to, I think, trust the process and also know that it is a practice. And anything that's a practice needs to be practiced. So the more you do it, the more it will become beneficial to you. So obviously we've spoken about your journal, new one coming out that's very exciting. We've spoken a little bit about the 7 Steps to Finding Flow, your first book. I'd love for you to share a little more about your second book that's just launched.
Perfect. So it launched in March this year. It's called Embrace Your Elegant Power, Your Path to Success Through Ease. And it's really the level up from the first book. I call it the level up to shine. But really at the heart of it is, when did we stop trusting ourselves? When did we stop tuning into that knowing that we have within us, that we know what's best for ourselves, rather than giving up our power to external authorities, the stories that we've always told ourselves? And how do we then start to unshackle from the shoulds in life? That societal conditioning around what a picture of success should look like, to redefine it for ourselves, really reframe perspectives that we've held for so long, including self first is no longer selfish, build boundaries that are badass, because boundaries are the cornerstone of our energy management in so many different ways, but also then tune back in to our unique gifts. It's so important that we bring all aspects of ourselves forward, rather than keeping certain aspects hidden in shame. At the launch, there were 2 women who actually ended up in tears, good tears, because they finally forgave themselves. They'd judged themselves, because the one was a lawyer by day and a vegan food photographer, on the side. And she didn't want to tell anyone about this. She said, but it's too, incongruous and no one's going to value that. I said, well, if you're keeping it hidden in shame, people are going to reflect that back to you. And I want people to remember that they're enough right now. And to use that analogy of being like a diamond, that there's all of these facets of you, not that they have to all shine at the same time, but what you bring to the light shines. So it's not asking people to multitask the hell out of themselves, but really say all aspects of me are worthy right now. And if I start to stand in my own power, really with my self-worth and my self-ownership, it's really, like it's the most powerful thing we can do. And I go into a lot the definitions of power versus force, because I think that's been confused for too long in society. And I'll just end off with one quote, which I just love, and that is by Anne Lamott. And it personifies power, elegant power for me perfectly. The lighthouse didn't run all over the island looking for boats to save. It just stood there shining.
Oh, very, very powerful. Very, very powerful. And it's so inspirational to see how you have, from lockdown, just been able to slide into your own groove, and really doing that by allowing yourself to forgive yourself, by reconnecting with yourself. And really finding, I think, what is authenticity in the work that you're doing, and it flowing really freely because it's your truth, which is so inspiring, Nikki. And thank you so, so much for making the time to be here. I know that everyone here has I can see really enjoy this conversation. I saw we actually have a comment here asking where they can get your books, if it's on Amazon, because we've got Kira here who's in Scotland. So where can people find your work, find your books?
The good news is it's everywhere. So if you're in South Africa, all good bookstores, off my website, nickyrowbotham.com, places like Take a Lot and Loot. But it is on Amazon, it's on Kindle and all ebook formats, and it's also in audiobook formats, including Audible.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. And then just to close off, to those who are still here, and I will inform you guys, but Nicky is very generously doing a giveaway with us. So if you were touched by this conversation, if you're inspired to know more, keep an eye on my socials. And I'm going to post something tomorrow, and you could be the lucky winner of these amazing. Sorry, I dropped off there. My laptop blanked on me.
Listen, you got the full message across that needed to get out. So
it was like boop at the end. But thank you, Nicky. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. It really was an absolute pleasure. And we are definitely going to have a part 2 of this conversation, because I have 1,000 other questions and insights that I would love to speak to you about. So thank you so much, and have a beautiful week further.
You too. Thanks, Kathleen. And thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.